There are Memorial Day weekend events, remembering those who died for our country all over the North Country this weekend. But all this past week in Lake George, there's been a unique and stirring memorial, a ceremony for largely teenagers who fought in the Revolutionary War 250 years ago, who didn't get a proper burial until now. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Clarkson University, offering over 95 programs of study with campuses in the Hudson Valley, Central and Northern New York. More at clarkson.edu. And AmeriQ Credit Union, providing money market accounts, a savings option suitable for short-term goals, or everyday access to funds. Details at ameriq.org. Federally insured by NCUA.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Friday, May 22nd. First up, state lawmakers are finally passing budget bills. New York Public News Network reporters Samuel King and Jimmy Vielkind break down what's in them and what's still not done at the Capitol.
Hey, Samuel.
Hi, Jimmy.
Samuel, 3 budget bills have now passed. They included changes in school funding and new restrictions on ghost guns, and some new laws aimed at protecting immigrants and restricting cooperation with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and other federal agencies. Walk me through some of the big provisions in this bill.
Well, Jimmy, the bill bans formal 287G agreements between ICE and local police departments or sheriff's offices. It prohibits local jail cells from being used for immigration detention. It restricts how all law enforcement agents can wear masks, and it gives individuals the right to sue if they're harmed by law enforcement. State Senator Julia Salazar of Brooklyn spoke during the emotional floor debate.
Today, we are finally acting to end these 287G agreements and IGSAs in New York. Immigration detention at the hands of ICE is a shameful business.
Most Democrats voted in support of the measure.
And what do Republicans think of this, Samuel? I imagine they had lots of concerns that they aired on the floor.
Lots of concerns. Republicans say this will make it harder for local police officers to cooperate with ICE. They argue that means undocumented immigrants who commit crimes won't be quickly deported. Assemblymember Jarrett Gandolfo is a Republican from Suffolk County.
The federal government can step in and get them off the streets. And what this bill does is prevent that from happening again in the future.
I have to note, though, that this legislation still allows local police to call federal agents unless there's a local law prohibiting them from doing so. Cities like New York, Buffalo, and Ithaca all have broader sanctuary policies.
Yeah, and Governor Hochul really resisted a broader ban on that informal kind of cooperation. I think it's noteworthy that she's on board with this much restriction, and that's quite an evolution for her over time.
How so?
Well, if we go back to 2007, Hochul, as Erie County clerk, threatened to call ICE if undocumented immigrants applied for driver's licenses. And as recently as last year, she stressed how New York cooperates with ICE over and over again. So to get some context on this, WNYC reached out to Muzaffar Chishti. He's a senior fellow at the Migration Policy Institute think tank, and he says the surge of ICE agents to Minnesota this year and the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy really changed the political climate.
Everything that was considered unacceptable and sort of third rail in immigration politics suddenly became acceptable.
In addition to Hochul, other moderate Democrats like New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill and Maryland Governor Wes Moore have signed immigration bills. All 3 of those governors, though, have fallen a little bit short of what immigration advocacy groups wanted.
Well, Jimmy, as you mentioned, there are now 3 budget bills that have passed, but that means there are 7 that aren't. Are things still settled?
Well, no, not everything is settled. The public hasn't seen written details yet of the plans to improve pension benefits for public workers or to scale back the state's climate laws. So this is expected to stretch after Memorial Day, which means legislators are only going to have 1 week of scheduled session in June to do everything else. I asked Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie if he could even say what the total size of the budget is at this point. What will all funds spending be?
I don't know.
I still don't know.
I don't know.
And then just building on the other question, what can we expect to see in these last non-budget days of session? Because this has eaten up a lot of
Trying
time.
to make sure we pass as many bills that are important to our members.
Many bills.
Many.
We'll keep watching for which ones that actually pass. Talk soon, Jimmy.
Take care, Samuel.
Those are our Albany Capitol reporters for the New York Public News Network, Samuel King and Jimmy Vielkind. A group of Continental Army soldiers who died while fighting the British are finally being laid to rest in Lake George. They died 250 years ago. The effort to remember and honor their sacrifice began after their remains were discovered at a construction site. NPR's Brian Mann has our story.
Everything goes on the first row.
It's a bright spring morning. Volunteers from a military veterans club are gathering outside the New York State Museum in Albany.
Who's ever going to be pallbearer? Come on in. Take your guard.
They pull on white gloves and begin to load small pine boxes onto military trucks draped with American flags and black funeral bunting. Lisa Anderson is overseeing today's ceremony. She's curator of bioarchaeology at the museum. Inside these boxes are the remains of at least 40 Continental Army soldiers.
Today is really the beginning of proper honors for young men who basically volunteered to go and fight for our independence.
These trucks will carry the remains north to their final resting place. Here's why this is happening now. In 2019, workers were digging the foundations for an apartment building in Lake George, New York, when they began finding bones and teeth. Local officials called in Anderson's team.
There was almost an immediate discovery of some buttons that were related to the Revolutionary War. They were from the uniform of a soldier from the 1st Pennsylvania Battalion.
Researchers sifted through the remains, trying to figure out how these men died and how they should be honored. In Saratoga Springs, crowds line the streets as the procession passes through towns that were battlefields of the Revolution.
To be able to recognize those folks today is really a great honor to be here.
Sean Kelleher is town historian. As the trucks pause outside City Hall, he helps form an honor guard wearing his reenactor garb, the brown wool coat and musket of a Continental Army soldier. Kelleher was part of the research effort to learn as much as possible about these soldiers. Their individual names and their stories are lost.
These soldiers, unfortunately, there is not that detail. We don't really know exactly it was this individual.
Here's what we do know. In the fall of 1775, the Continental Army invaded Canada, a bold effort to turn Quebec into a 14th colony. It was a disaster, and the Americans retreated in 1776, their ranks swept by outbreaks of typhus and smallpox. Lisa Anderson says the suffering was terrible.
They had no provisions. They didn't have tents and food. There were lots of reports of starvation.
The Army established a crude military hospital for smallpox patients in Lake George. After studying the remains, Anderson concluded these men were among hundreds who died of disease and were buried quickly in unmarked graves. Many of the soldiers were teenagers.
Knowing that so many of them were young, it resonates with a lot of us. So many enlisted in their teens, and there were some in their 20s.
It's midday when the procession reaches a hillside above the shore of Lake George. Once a war zone, it's peaceful now. Hundreds of people watch as volunteers slide the pine boxes one by one into a mausoleum at the center of a new memorial.
Yep. Okay.
A priest steps forward to pray.
We earnestly ask you to look upon this sacred space now and bless it as we commit to the earth those who fought so hard for our freedom.
Larry Handy stands watching at the edge of the crowd. He's a historian and Revolutionary War reenactor who helped recover and study the remains. He says his own ancestors took part in the failed campaign where these men died.
You know, they were lost to history. They've been found now.
Now that these remains have been returned to Lake George, the official ceremony consecrating the burial and memorial site will take place tomorrow morning. Brian Mann, NPR News, Lake George, New York.
The story first aired yesterday on NPR's All Things Considered. We have more news through the weekend at ncpr.org. Music today by Eddie Lawrence of Saranac Lake and Evan Veenstra of Gananoque, Ontario. Have a great holiday weekend. Story of the Day is back on Tuesday. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.